Professor Evelyn Shaw laughed as she wrote an impossible equation on the board, turning to her class with a mocking promise. "Solve this and I'll marry you myself." The students erupted in laughter, never imagining anyone would take her seriously. But when Darius Cole, the quiet janitor emptying trash in the back of the room, stopped mid-step and stared at that chalkboard with unsettling intensity, something shifted. "I can solve it," he said quietly, and the room fell silent. Nobody knew that the man they dismissed without a glance had once been the university's brightest mind, or that he was about to teach Professor Shaw a lesson she'd never forget, that brilliance doesn't wear a uniform, and some promises, even those made in cruelty, have consequences nobody sees coming. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun cast long shadows across Hartfield University's pristine campus, illuminating buildings that housed some of the brightest minds in the country. Students hurried between lecture halls, clutching coffee cups and textbooks, their conversations filled with theories and formulas. The university's reputation preceded it. Rigorous STEM programs, world-renowned faculty, and a student body selected from the top percentile of applicants nationwide. Everyone who walked these halls knew they were supposed to be exceptional. Darius Cole knew it too. He just wasn't supposed to be part of that world. At 34, Darius had worked the night shift and early morning maintenance detail for nearly 8 years. He moved through the campus like a ghost, emptying trash bins, mopping floors, and wiping down chalkboards before most people arrived. His navy blue uniform marked him as part of the invisible workforce, the people students walked past without making eye contact, the ones professors forgot existed until something needed fixing. This particular Tuesday morning found Darius in the mathematics and physics building, his cleaning cart squeaking softly as he made his rounds. Room 304 was empty, but the chalkboard was covered in yesterday's lecture notes. He paused at the threshold, his dark eyes scanning the equations that stretched from one end of the board to the other. Complex differential equations, nested integrals, transformation matrices, the kind of mathematics that made graduate students lose sleep. Darius set down his spray bottle and walked closer. His fingers traced the air just inches from the chalk dust, following the logic of each step. Near the bottom right corner, someone had erased part of a crucial transformation, leaving the solution incomplete. Without thinking, Darius picked up a piece of chalk and quietly corrected the error, filling in the missing variable. His handwriting was neat, practiced, confident. "There you go," he whispered to the empty room, then immediately erased what he'd written and wiped the ars entire board clean. No one could know. No one ever knew. Down the hallway, Professor Evelyn Shaw was already in her office, preparing for her 10 o'clock lecture. At 36, she'd built a reputation as one of the sharpest mathematical minds in the department. Her research on theoretical applications of nonlinear systems had been published in prestigious journals, and students competed for spots in her classes. She had the kind of confidence that came from being told you were brilliant your entire life. That confidence sometimes crossed into arrogance. Shaw gathered her notes and headed toward the lecture hall, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She passed Darius in the corridor without acknowledgement, her mind already focused on the day's lesson. Behind her, Darius stepped aside, waiting until she'd passed before continuing his work. By 9:45, room 304 was filling with students. Advanced theoretical mathematics drew a crowd of ambitious seniors and brave juniors, all hoping to prove themselves worthy of Shaw's attention. The energy in the room was anxious today. Word had spread that Shaw was preparing them for what she called her impossible exam, a test so difficult that most students would be grateful just to pass. Shaw entered precisely at 10, setting her leather bag on the desk with practiced ease. "Good morning, future mathematicians," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the tiered seating. "I trust you've all been studying. You're going to need it." A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. Shaw turned to the chalkboard and began writing. The equation that emerged was monstrous, a theoretical problem involving nested roots, complex variables, and limit operations that seemed to fold in on themselves. Students frantically copied it into their notebooks, though many struggled to keep up with her rapid chalk strokes. When she finished, Shaw stepped back and admired her work. "This," she announced, tapping the board, "is the kind of problem you'll face on your final exam. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. Only 3 people in the world have published solutions to this exact formulation. 3. Out of billions." The room fell silent except for the scratch of pencils. A male student in the 3rd row, Tyler Bennett, raised his hand. He was the kind of student who asked questions to hear himself talk. "Professor Shaw, what happens if one of us actually solves it today?" Shaw laughed, a theatrical sound that filled the hall. "If one of you solves this today, in this room right now," she paused for effect, her smile widening, "I'll marry you myself." The class erupted in laughter. Students nudged each other, enjoying the absurdity of the statement. Shaw basked in their amusement, clearly pleased with her own wit. "I mean it," she continued, playing along. "Solve this equation right now, and I'll walk you down the aisle. I'll even let you pick the venue." More laughter. Someone in the back shouted, "Better start picking out a ring, Professor." Shaw was still smiling when the door at the back of the lecture hall opened quietly. Darius entered, apologetic in his posture, carrying a black trash bag. He'd timed his rounds poorly. He usually avoided interrupting classes, but his supervisor had changed his schedule this week. Shaw's smile faded slightly. She paused mid-sentence, her eyes tracking Darius as he moved along the back wall, quietly emptying the bins mounted near the exits. "Sorry," Darius said softly, not making eye contact with anyone. "I'll be quick." Shaw didn't respond immediately, clearly irritated by the interruption to her rhythm. Students glanced back at Darius, then returned their attention to the board, dismissing him as quickly as they'd noticed him. Tyler Bennett, always looking for a laugh, saw an opportunity. He pointed toward Darius and said loudly, "Hey, not even our janitor could solve that thing." Several students laughed. A girl near the front added, "Nobody can, that's the point." Shaw didn't discourage them. Instead, she smirked slightly, enjoying the moment of levity. "Well, if our maintenance staff happens to have a PhD in theoretical mathematics, I'd love to know about it." More laughter. Darius continued his work, his jaw tight. He'd heard worse over the years, this barely registered. But as he moved toward the front of the room to collect the bin near Shaw's desk, his eyes landed on the chalkboard. He stopped mid-step. The equation stared back at him, and something inside his mind clicked into place. The nested roots, the complex variables, the limit operations. They weren't monstrous at all. They were elegant, beautiful even. He could see the path through them, the transformations that would unravel each layer until the solution emerged like a sculpture from marble. Shaw noticed him staring. "Something interesting, Mr. Cole." Darius blinked, suddenly aware that the room had gone quiet. "Sorry, ma'am. I was just admiring my work." Shaw's tone was playful, condescending. "It's quite something, isn't it? Most people find it intimidating." Darius looked at her, then back at the board. His heart was beating faster now, adrenaline mixing with something he hadn't felt in years, the pure thrill of seeing a problem he knew he could solve. "I can solve it," he said quietly. Several students exchanged glances, unsure if they'd heard correctly. "What was that?" Shaw asked, her smile frozen in place. Darius cleared his throat and spoke louder. "I said I can solve it." The room erupted in scattered laughter, though some students looked uncertain. Tyler Bennett grinned widely. Oh man, this is gonna be good. Shaw's expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, amusement. She settled on patronizing kindness. That's very bold of you, Mr. Cole. But I assure you this isn't something you just figure out by. I understand what it is, Darius interrupted gently. And I can solve it. Shaw folded her arms, her smile now fixed and artificial. The students leaned forward in their seats, sensing drama. Someone in the back had already pulled out their phone. Well then, Shaw said, her voice dripping with theatrical enthusiasm. By all means, if you can solve that equation. She paused, glancing at her students with a knowing look. I'll marry you myself. The class laughed again, but this time the sound was different, hungrier, anticipating a spectacle. Darius looked at the chalkboard, then at Shaw, then back at the board. Every instinct told him to walk away, to apologize and leave, to stay invisible like he'd learned to do. But something deeper rose up inside him. 8 years of silence, of hiding, of pretending to be less than he was. He set down his trash bag and walked slowly toward the board. The laughter died immediately. Students sat frozen, watching him approach. Shaw's smile faltered, her arms still folded, but her posture less certain now. Darius picked up a piece of chalk. His hand was steady. The entire room held its breath. He touched the chalk to the board and began to write. The first stroke of chalk against the blackboard seemed to echo through the lecture hall. Darius wrote without hesitation, his movements fluid and precise. He started by restating the original equation in cleaner notation, then immediately began the first transformation. Students whispered to each other. Is he just guessing? Maybe he memorized something? There's no way. But Darius wasn't guessing. His method was deliberate, structured, sophisticated. He factored out the complex variables using a technique that made the nested roots more manageable, then applied a substitution that revealed hidden symmetries in the equation. Each step built logically on the last, and his handwriting, neat, controlled, practiced, told its own story. Shaw had stopped smiling entirely. She stepped closer to the board, her eyes scanning what he'd written. Her expression shifted from amusement to confusion, then to something that looked like concern. She recognized the transformation method he was using. It was an advanced technique typically taught only in specialized graduate seminars. Where had a janitor learned this? Darius continued writing, his quiet voice explaining each step as if he were teaching a class. The key is recognizing that this limit operation can be rewritten as a summation if we apply the appropriate convergence criteria. Once we do that, the nested roots collapse into a simpler radical form. A female student in the front row gasped softly. He's actually doing it. Tyler Bennett had his phone out now, recording. Several others followed suit. This was going to go viral. They could feel it. The audacity of the situation was too perfect. A janitor, a mocking professor, and a promise made in jest that might actually need to be kept. Shaw's face had drained of color. She moved even closer to the board, her eyes darting across each line of mathematics. Every step was correct. Not just correct, elegant. He was using methods she'd only seen in published research papers. Her mind raced. Who was this man? The door at the back of the lecture hall opened quietly, and Marcus Thompson, a doctoral teaching assistant, entered carrying a stack of papers. He'd come to drop off graded homework, but he froze when he saw what was happening. A man in a maintenance uniform was covering the board with advanced mathematics while the entire class watched in silence. Marcus moved closer, squinting at the board. His eyes widened. "Who taught you that method?" Marcus blurted out, unable to contain himself. Darius paused briefly, glancing back. "No one. I read about it." "You read about it." Marcus's voice cracked with disbelief. That's a transformation technique from a paper published last year in the Journal of Theoretical Applications. It's graduate-level research. Darius shrugged slightly and returned to his work. The library's open to everyone. Shaw felt her throat tighten. The implications were crashing down on her like a wave. If he was right, if he actually solved this, she'd made a promise in front of 40 students, and at least 5 of them were currently filming. More than that, though, she'd mocked him. She'd laughed at him. And he was about to prove her completely, devastatingly wrong. Darius reached the critical section of the proof now, the nested integrals that represented the deepest complexity of the problem. These were the steps that separated casual mathematicians from true experts. He approached them methodically, applying integration by parts in a way that simplified the expression beautifully. Then he used a clever substitution that made the remaining integral tractable. The room was completely silent now, except for the scratch of chalk on board. Even the students who didn't fully understand the mathematics could sense they were witnessing something extraordinary. The confidence in Darius's movements, the way he never hesitated or second-guessed himself. This wasn't luck or memorization. This was mastery. Shaw tested one of his steps mentally, following his logic. It was flawless. She checked another. Also perfect. A sick feeling settled in her stomach. Darius wrote out the final integration steps, his chalk moving faster now as the solution revealed itself. The complex expression simplified, terms canceling elegantly until only the essential components remained. He isolated the final variable, performed one last algebraic manipulation, and then he stepped back from the board. The answer sat there in simple, beautiful notation. Minimal. Elegant. Complete. For 5 full seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Shaw forced herself to approach the board. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced through his work, checking each transformation, each substitution, each step of logic. She pulled out her phone and opened a calculator app, verifying the numerical components. She cross-referenced the technique against her own mental database of mathematical methods. Every single step was correct. Every transformation was valid. The solution was perfect. Shaw turned to face the class, her face pale. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. This is correct. The lecture hall exploded. Students jumped from their seats, shouting in disbelief. Some were cheering, others laughing in shock. Tyler Bennett looked at his phone recording, his mouth hanging open. The girl in the front row had her hands covering her face, giggling uncontrollably. "Oh my God," someone shouted. "He actually did it. Professor Shaw, are you really gonna marry him? This is insane. Did that just happen?" Marcus stood near the back, shaking his head slowly, a smile of pure amazement spreading across his face. He'd spent 5 years in this department and had never seen anything like this. Shaw tried to maintain composure, but her hands were shaking. She forced a stiff smile, the kind people wear when they're trying to appear gracious but are actually dying inside. "Well," she said, her voice tight, "I suppose I should be more careful about what I promise." The class laughed again, but this time it wasn't with her. It was at her. The power dynamic had shifted completely in the span of 15 minutes. One student called out, "You said you'd marry him." Another added, "We all heard it. We've got it on video." Shaw's smile became more forced. "Yes, well, I think we can all agree that was hyperbole." "A promise is a promise, Professor," Tyler shouted, grinning wickedly. The teasing continued for another minute, students clearly enjoying their professor's discomfort. Shaw tried to regain control of the room, clapping her hands together. All right, let's settle down. Mr. Cole has certainly demonstrated unexpected expertise, but we still have a lecture to complete." Darius had been standing quietly near the board, watching the chaos unfold around him. He hadn't expected this reaction. Part of him wished he'd just walked away, stayed invisible like always. But another part, a part he'd buried years ago, felt something like vindication. He picked up the eraser and began wiping the board clean, removing his solution stroke by stroke. "Wait," a student called out. "I wanted to take a picture." "Too late," another student said, holding up their phone. "Already got it." Darius wiped away the final lines of mathematics, leaving only chalk dust behind. He turned to Shaw and said quietly, "Just doing what you asked, ma'am." But everyone in that room knew he'd done far more than that. Shaw met his eyes for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Embarrassment, certainly, but also a flicker of curiosity, maybe even respect. Who was this man who moved through her world invisibly, but possessed knowledge that rivaled her own? Darius picked up his trash bag and headed toward the door. Students watched him go, some with open admiration, others still laughing at the absurdity of what they'd witnessed. As he reached the exit, Marcus called out, "Hey, wait, what's your name?" Darius paused at the threshold. "Darius Cole." "Where'd you study, Darius?" Darius was quiet for a moment, his hand on the door. "Long time ago. Doesn't matter now." He left before anyone could ask more questions, the door closing softly behind him. The lecture hall remained in chaos for several more minutes. Shaw tried to continue her lesson, but no one was paying attention. Students were texting friends, posting about what happened, uploading videos. Within the hour, the footage would spread across campus social media. By evening, it would be trending on multiple platforms. Professor Shaw had made a joke. The janitor had taken it seriously, and in 15 minutes he'd proven that brilliance doesn't care about job titles, credentials, or who society says belongs in academic spaces. The question everyone would soon be asking was simple. Who exactly was Darius Cole? And why was he pushing a cleaning cart instead of teaching classes? Shaw gathered her materials with shaking hands, her mind already racing ahead to the implications of what had just happened. The video would spread. The dean would hear about it. Colleagues would ask questions. And she would have to face the uncomfortable truth that she'd underestimated someone completely, made him the subject of mockery, and been proven wrong in the most public way possible. But more than her embarrassment, more than her wounded pride, Shaw felt something else stirring. A genuine curiosity about the quiet man who just walked out of her classroom. What was his story? What circumstances had led someone with such extraordinary ability to spend his days emptying trash bins? As students finally began to file out, still buzzing with excitement, Marcus approached Shaw's desk. "You know what this means, right?" he said quietly. Shaw looked up at him, exhausted. "That I'm going to be the subject of campus gossip for weeks." "That," Marcus agreed, "but also that you just witnessed something remarkable. That man isn't just smart. He's operating at a level most of us will never reach. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Shaw didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as she left the lecture hall and walked down the corridor where Darius had disappeared minutes before, she knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Whatever happened next, that equation on the board and the promise she'd made so carelessly had set something in motion that neither of them could stop now. The video went viral overnight. By Wednesday morning, every phone on Hartfield University's campus seemed to be replaying the same 15-minute clip. A janitor in navy blue solving an impossible equation while a professor watched in stunned silence. The comment sections exploded with reactions ranging from admiration to schadenfreude. Students who'd never noticed Darius before suddenly knew his name. He hated every second of it. Darius arrived for his morning shift at 5:30, hoping the early hour would shield him from attention. It didn't. As he pushed his cart through the science building, he could hear students whispering, feel their eyes following him. Some smiled encouragingly. Others pulled out phones, trying to sneak photos. A few brave ones approached asking for autographs or selfies, treating him like a celebrity rather than a person. "I'm just trying to work," he told them gently, moving past with his head down. But the attention didn't stop. By mid-morning, the mathematics department was buzzing. Professors gathered in small clusters, speaking in hushed voices about the genius janitor. Some were genuinely curious. Others felt threatened, worried that their own expertise looked diminished by comparison. A handful were embarrassed. If a maintenance worker could solve problems they struggled with, what did that say about them? Professor Shaw barely slept Tuesday night. She'd watched the video 17 times, studying Darius's technique, trying to understand how she'd missed something so obvious. The man cleaned her classroom 4 times a week. She'd walked past him hundreds of times. How had she never noticed? Wednesday morning found her in the administration building, sitting at a computer terminal in Human Resources. She'd convinced the department secretary to let her access employee files, claiming she needed information for a special academic opportunity. The secretary, starstruck by the viral video, agreed immediately. Shaw pulled up Darius Cole's file and began reading. The basics were sparse. Hired 8 years ago, exemplary performance reviews, never missed a shift. No disciplinary issues, but there were gaps. Large ones. His employment history before Hartfield showed scattered jobs, retail, warehouse work, food service, nothing that suggested advanced education. Then she found it, buried in the optional education section. 1 year of undergraduate study at Hartfield University 15 years ago. Incomplete. No degree awarded. Enrollment terminated. Shaw's hands froze on the keyboard. He'd been a student here, at this very university. Her mind raced. What had happened? Why had he left? And why had he come back as maintenance staff? She dug deeper, accessing older records that required administrative passwords. The secretary had walked away for coffee, leaving Shaw alone. She knew she was violating privacy policies, but curiosity overrode caution. There, a scholarship record. Full academic scholarship for mathematics and physics. Awarded to Darius Cole, age 19. Academic performance, exceptional. First-year GPA, perfect. Second semester enrollment, withdrawn. Reason for withdrawal: family emergency, medical. Shaw sat back in her chair, the pieces beginning to form a picture she didn't want to see. A brilliant young student, forced to leave school. Medical emergency. Years of low-wage work. Then returning to the place where his dreams had died, but only to clean its floors. Down the hallway, Professor Martin Hendricks was also reading about Darius. But his information came from memory. At 62, Hendricks had taught at Hartfield for 35 years. He'd seen thousands of students come and go, but some you never forgot. He found Shaw in the HR office, startling her. "Looking into our unexpected prodigy?" Hendricks asked, his voice knowing. Shaw closed the file quickly, guilty. "I was just trying to figure out who he is," Hendricks finished. "I can save you some trouble. I remember him." Shaw's eyes widened. "You taught him?" "Briefly. Fall semester, 15 years ago. Introduction to Theoretical Mathematics. He was the brightest student I'd seen in a decade." Hendricks's expression grew somber. Then his mother got sick, cancer, aggressive. He tried to balance school and taking care of her, but it was impossible. By December, he'd withdrawn to work full-time, pay for her treatments. Did she survive? Hendricks shook his head slowly. She passed the following spring. By then, Darius had lost his scholarship eligibility, accumulated debt, and missed too much time to re-enroll easily. The system failed him, plain and simple. We gave him a semester of compassion, then moved on to the next crop of students. Shaw felt sick, and he came back here to work. 7 years later, yes. I recognized him immediately when he started in maintenance. but he made it clear he didn't want to discuss the past. I respected that. Hendricks looked at Shaw intently. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? Shaw didn't have an answer yet. By lunchtime, the campus was in full gossip mode. The student newspaper published an emergency online edition with the headline, "Mystery Janitor Solves Impossible Equation, Professor's Promise Goes Viral." The article had been viewed 12,000 times in 3 hours. Darius spent his lunch break hiding in the custodial supply closet in the basement of the engineering building. It was the only place he could find silence. He sat on an overturned bucket, eating a peanut butter sandwich, trying to process how his carefully maintained invisibility had shattered in 15 minutes. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Someone had found his barely used social media profile and tagged him in hundreds of posts. Friend requests poured in from strangers. His direct messages were flooded with everything from marriage proposals to job offers to interview requests from podcasters. He turned off the phone and sat in darkness, finishing his sandwich in peace. A knock on the door made him jump. "Darius, it's Professor Shaw. Can we talk?" He considered not answering, but the door wasn't locked. She could walk in if she wanted. After a moment, he said, "It's open." Shaw entered cautiously, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. She saw him sitting there, looking exhausted, and something in her chest tightened with guilt. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said quietly. "I've been looking for you. Congratulations. You found me." The bitterness in his voice was gentle but unmistakable. Shaw deserved it. She pulled the door partially closed behind her, giving them privacy. "I owe you an apology, a real one. What I did in that classroom, the way I mocked you, encouraged my students to mock you, it was cruel and unprofessional. I'm deeply sorry." Darius looked at her, weighing her sincerity. "You didn't know. That's not an excuse. I shouldn't have treated anyone that way, regardless of who they were or what I assumed about them." They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Shaw took a breath. "I spoke with Professor Hendricks. He told me you were a student here once. He told me why you left." Darius's jaw tightened. That wasn't his story to tell. "I know, and I'm sorry for prying. But Darius..." Shaw moved closer, her voice earnest. "What happened to you was unfair. You deserved better. You still deserve better. I have a job. It pays my bills. That's more than a lot of people can say. You're wasting your potential emptying trash bins." Darius stood abruptly, his sandwich wrapper falling to the floor. "My potential? You don't know anything about my potential. You didn't care about it yesterday when I was just the janitor interrupting your lecture. You care now because I embarrassed you, because I made you look bad in front of your students. Don't pretend this is about me." Shaw flinched at the accuracy of his words. "You're right. Part of this is about me, about my ego and my embarrassment. But that doesn't change the fact that you're brilliant and you're hiding it. I'm not hiding anything. I'm surviving. There's a difference. Then stop just surviving and start living again. Come back to school. Finish what you started." Darius laughed bitterly. "With what money? What scholarship? I'm 34 years old with 8 years of employment history as a janitor. No university will take me seriously. This one will, I'll make sure of it." "Why?" Darius challenged. "Why do you suddenly care?" Shaw met his eyes directly. "Because yesterday you showed me that I've become exactly the kind of professor I promised myself I'd never be. The kind who judges people by their appearance, their job title, their circumstances. The kind who forgets that brilliance can exist anywhere." Her voice cracked slightly. "You reminded me that I'm capable of cruelty, and I don't like who I saw in that video. So yes, part of this is selfish, but part of it is also right." Darius studied her face, looking for deception and finding only genuine remorse. He sat back down on the bucket, suddenly exhausted. "Even if I wanted to come back," he said quietly, I don't belong in that world anymore. 15 years is a long time. The mathematics have evolved. The field has moved on. I'd be starting over. So start over. You solved a problem in 15 minutes that most PhD candidates couldn't touch. You're not starting from nothing. You're starting from exceptional. Before Darius could respond, his supervisor's voice echoed down the hallway. Cole, where are you? You've got 3 buildings behind schedule. Shaw stepped toward the door. Think about it, please. And if you decide you want help, come find me. She left quickly, passing Darius's supervisor with a polite nod. Darius emerged from the closet, grabbed his cart, and returned to work, Shaw's words echoing in his mind. By Thursday, the story had spread beyond campus. Local news picked it up. Janitor stuns university professor with mathematical genius. The coverage was sympathetic but also sensationalized, treating Darius like a feel-good curiosity rather than a person. Students began approaching him differently now. Some wanted help with their homework. Others asked him to explain concepts their professors had made confusing. A group of engineering majors invited him to their study group. Despite his discomfort with the attention, Darius found himself saying yes to a few of them. The tutoring started informally. After his shift on Thursday evening, he met 3 students in the library: Sarah Chen, Marcus's younger sister; DeAndre Foster, a junior from Detroit; and Emma Patterson, a senior who was struggling with differential equations. Darius explained concepts in ways that clicked immediately. He didn't talk down to them or make them feel stupid for not understanding. He met them where they were and built bridges to comprehension. Within an hour, Emma had solved 3 problems that had stumped her for days. "You're a better teacher than half our professors," DeAndre said, shaking his head in amazement. "I just remember what it's like to not understand something," Darius replied. "Most professors have been experts for so long they forget that feeling." Word of these informal tutoring sessions spread quickly. By Friday, Darius had a waiting list. Shaw watched this development from a distance, simultaneously proud and troubled. Darius was clearly gifted not just in mathematics, but in teaching. Yet he remained trapped in a system that valued credentials over capability. She knew she needed to do something, but she wasn't sure what. The decision was made for her on Friday afternoon when she received a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. Someone wants to meet him. MH." Shaw opened her laptop and found a message from Martin Hendricks with an attachment. The attachment was a business card, high-quality stock with embossed lettering. Dr. Rebecca Morgan, Senior Talent Acquisitions, Prometheus Research Institute, where brilliance finds purpose. Below the card was a note from Hendricks. "She saw the video. She's flying in Monday. Thought you should know." Shaw's stomach dropped. Prometheus Research Institute was a private think tank known for recruiting exceptional minds to work on classified projects. They offered enormous salaries, cutting-edge facilities, and absolute secrecy. Scientists who joined Prometheus often disappeared from public academic life entirely. She grabbed her phone and called Hendricks immediately. "Tell me about Prometheus," she demanded without preamble. "Elite Research Consortium. They recruit maybe 10 people a year, usually established researchers with proven track records. If they're interested in Darius, it means they see something extraordinary." "Is it legitimate?" "Depends on your definition. They do real science, but their funding sources are questionable. Defense contracts, pharmaceutical companies, tech conglomerates. Their researchers sign NDAs so strict that families don't know what they're working on." Shaw felt her protective instincts surge. "He's vulnerable right now. They could take advantage of him. Or they could give him opportunities we can't match. Shaw, be honest with yourself. Can Hartfield really accommodate someone like him? Our systems aren't built for people who fall through the cracks." Shaw ended the call, her mind racing. Hendricks was right. Even if she convinced the administration to readmit Darius, he'd face years of bureaucracy, financial struggles, and academic politics. Prometheus could bypass all of that, but at what cost? She needed to warn him, let him make an informed choice. But as she reached for her phone to call him, she realized she didn't have his number. She'd never needed it before. He was just the janitor. That thought made her feel ashamed all over again. Monday morning arrived with cold rain and a sense of inevitability. Darius found the business card slipped under his apartment door when he woke at 4:30 for his shift. No note, no explanation. Just Dr. Rebecca Morgan's information and a handwritten message on the back. Coffee at 9 a.m., Stella's Cafe on campus. Your choice. He stared at the card for a long time, turning it over in his fingers. The embossing felt expensive, serious. This wasn't a joke or a publicity stunt. Someone with resources wanted to talk to him. Part of him wanted to throw the card away and pretend he'd never seen it. But another part, the part that had spent 15 years wondering, what if, couldn't let it go. At 8:45, after finishing his morning rounds, Darius changed out of his uniform in the custodial locker room. He put on jeans and a plain button-down shirt, clothes that made him feel less like himself. As he walked toward Stella's Cafe, his heart hammered with anxiety. Dr. Rebecca Morgan was easy to spot. She sat at a corner table, dressed in an elegant charcoal suit, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob. She looked up as Darius entered, and her smile was warm, genuine. "Darius Cole," she said, standing to shake his hand. "Thank you for meeting me. Please sit." Darius sat cautiously, feeling underdressed and out of place. The cafe was filled with professors and graduate students, people who belonged in academic spaces. He was acutely aware of the eyes that turned toward him, recognizing him from the viral video. "I'll be direct," Rebecca said, sliding a coffee toward him. Black, no sugar, exactly how he drank it. The fact that she'd somehow learned this detail was both impressive and unsettling. "Prometheus Research Institute is interested in you. Very interested." "Why?" Darius asked. "You don't know anything about me." "On the contrary, we know quite a bit. Your solution to Professor Shaw's equation was elegant, yes, but more importantly, it showed adaptive thinking. You approached a problem designed to be unsolvable and found a pathway through pure logical innovation. That's rare, extraordinarily rare." Darius sipped his coffee, saying nothing. Rebecca continued, "We've also learned about your academic history, the scholarship, the withdrawal, the years since. We understand that life hasn't been fair to you, Darius. Prometheus exists to correct such injustices. By offering me what, exactly? A position. Full-time research associate. Salary of $175,000 annually to start, with performance bonuses, housing stipend, health benefits that would make a senator jealous, and most importantly, freedom to pursue research in whatever area interests you." Darius nearly choked on his coffee. "That's generous?" "It is. Because we invest in people, not credentials. Your talent is worth far more than any degree." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "What's the catch?" Rebecca smiled appreciatively. "Smart question. The catch, Bevacoan, as you put it, is confidentiality. Our work is proprietary. You'd sign an NDA preventing you from discussing your research with anyone outside the Institute. Your projects would remain classified. Publications would be internal only. So I'd disappear. You'd be protected, valued, compensated extraordinarily well. But yes, your work wouldn't be public." Darius set down his coffee. "Who funds you?" "Private investors, defense contractors, technology conglomerates, pharmaceutical companies. We're not beholden to academic politics or public opinion. That freedom allows us to pursue breakthrough research." Research in what areas? Rebecca's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That depends on where your talents lead us. The answer was deliberately vague, and Darius knew it. He stood. Thank you for the coffee and the offer. I need time to think. Of course. But Darius, Rebecca's voice stopped him. Opportunities like this don't come twice. Hartfield University will never fully appreciate you. They'll offer you crumbs, maybe readmission, maybe a scholarship with strings attached. We're offering you respect. Darius left without responding, his mind spinning. He didn't notice Professor Shaw standing near the cafe entrance, partially hidden behind a support pillar. She'd come looking for him, hoping to warn him about Prometheus. Now, she'd watched the entire meeting, and the sick feeling in her stomach intensified. Shaw followed him at a distance as he walked across campus toward the maintenance building. When he stopped at a bench near the fountain, she approached. "You met with her," Shaw said without preamble. Darius looked up, unsurprised. "Were you spying on me? I was trying to protect you. Prometheus isn't what they seem." "And what are they?" Shaw sat beside him, uninvited. "A private research company that exploits brilliant people by isolating them, owning their work, and cutting them off from the broader scientific community. Researchers who go there often regret it, but they're bound by legal contracts so tight they can't leave. Sounds like you're describing most corporate jobs. This is different. Darius, I've seen what happens to people who join outfits like Prometheus. They get swallowed whole. Your work becomes their property, your ideas enrich their investors, and you can't even publish under your own name." Darius studied her face. "Why do you care? A week ago you didn't know I existed." "I care because you deserve better than being used by people who see you as an asset instead of a person." "That's rich coming from you." The words stung, but Shaw absorbed them. "You're right. I treated you exactly that way, as less than a person. But I'm trying to do better now. Stay here. Let me help you navigate the system properly. We can get you readmitted, find funding. How long would that take?" Shaw hesitated. "A semester, maybe 2, to process everything. And in the meantime, I'm still mopping floors. It's better than selling your soul to a corporation that will own everything you create." Darius stood. "At least they're making me an offer. All you're giving me is more waiting, more bureaucracy, more years of being invisible while the world passes me by." He walked away before Shaw could respond, leaving her sitting alone by the fountain, wondering if she'd already lost him. That afternoon, Darius received 3 more emails. The first was from a competing research institute offering similar terms. The second was from a tech startup wanting him to consult on algorithm development. The third was from a television production company offering to make a documentary about his life. Everyone suddenly wanted a piece of him. Nobody had wanted him a week ago. He deleted all 3 emails and focused on his work, trying to find comfort in routine. But everywhere he went, people stared. Students approached asking for help. Professors who'd never acknowledged him now stopped to chat, suddenly interested in his thoughts on academic matters. The attention felt suffocating. Wednesday brought a new complication. During his afternoon shift, Darius was summoned to the dean's office. He'd never met Dean Whitmore before. Maintenance staff and administrators occupied different universes. Dean Whitmore was in his late 50s with silver hair and a politician's smile. He gestured for Darius to sit, his demeanor friendly, but calculated. "Mr. Cole, I want to start by saying how impressed we've all been by your unexpected demonstration of mathematical ability. Truly remarkable." Darius said nothing, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I've been discussing your situation with our board of trustees, and we'd like to extend a unique opportunity. We'll reinstate your student status, provide a modest scholarship, and allow you to take classes while maintaining a reduced work schedule. You'd be a student and an employee, best of both worlds." It sounded generous on the surface. Darius knew better. What's the reduced schedule pay? Part-time wages, naturally. Perhaps 20 hours a week. That's half my current income. How would I pay rent? Dean Whitmore's smile tightened. Well, sacrifices are necessary for education, aren't they? Student loans are available. So you want me to go into debt while working for you part-time and attending classes full-time? I'd frame it as an investment in your future. Darius stood. Thank you for the offer, Dean Whitmore. I'll consider it. There is one more thing. The dean's voice took on a sharper edge. This situation has created certain publicity challenges for the university. We'd appreciate your discretion going forward, perhaps avoiding further viral moments that might embarrass our faculty. There it was. They wanted him quiet, controlled, grateful for whatever scraps they offered. I'll keep that in mind, Darius said evenly, and left. He was halfway across campus when Professor Shaw caught up with him, slightly out of breath. I heard about the dean's offer, she said. It's insulting. It's better than nothing. It's designed to keep you dependent and controllable. They're offering you just enough to feel obligated, but not enough to actually thrive. Darius stopped walking and turned to face her. What exactly do you want from me, Professor Shaw? You keep showing up, telling me what I shouldn't do, warning me away from opportunities. But what are you actually offering me besides more waiting and more uncertainty? Shaw opened her mouth, then closed it. He was right. She'd been critical of every option without providing a real alternative. I'm offering to fight for you, she said finally, to push the administration to do better, to help you navigate a system I know inside and out. Why? Because you remind me why I became a professor in the first place, because I made a promise to you, even if it was a joke, and because— She hesitated, vulnerability flashing across her face. Because I see myself in you. I know what it's like to be underestimated, to have to prove yourself over and over. I'm a woman in theoretical mathematics. I've spent my entire career fighting to be taken seriously. I recognize that fight in you. Darius felt something shift in his chest. For the first time, Shaw wasn't speaking as a guilty professor trying to assuage her conscience. She was speaking as someone who genuinely understood. Help me prepare for the academic placement exam, he said quietly. If I'm going to come back to school, I want to do it on my own terms, with my own scores proving I belong. No favors, no special treatment, just evidence that I can compete at this level. Shaw's face broke into a genuine smile. Okay, yes. When do we start? Tonight, after my shift. If you're serious about this, prove it. I will. They shook hands, and for the first time since the equation on the chalkboard, Darius felt like he was moving forward instead of just reacting. What neither of them knew was that Dr. Rebecca Morgan had just sent an email to her superiors with a subject line that would change everything. Target acquired. Expect complications. Recommend aggressive recruitment protocol. And in his office, Dr. Andrew Lang, a rival professor who'd watched Shaw's rising popularity with growing resentment, was composing an anonymous email to the university's HR department. The complaint he filed would accuse Darius of misconduct, fabricate stories about intimidation, and systematically attempt to destroy the credibility he'd only just begun to build. The forces gathering against Darius were more powerful than either he or Shaw realized, but they were also underestimating something crucial. A man who'd survived 15 years of invisibility had learned how to fight in ways they'd never expect. The real battle was just beginning. Shaw and Darius had been working together for 3 nights when the summons arrived. Their study sessions had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Darius finished his shift at 9, met Shaw in her office at 9:30, and they worked through advanced mathematics until midnight. She was impressed by how quickly he absorbed material, how he'd retained so much despite 15 years away from formal education. Thursday morning shattered that progress. Darius arrived at work to find an email marked urgent. He was required to report to Human Resources immediately. No explanation, no context. Just a summons that made his stomach drop with familiar dread. He'd seen this before. The bureaucratic machinery preparing to crush someone who didn't fit neatly into organizational boxes. The HR conference room was coldly professional. 2 representatives sat waiting. Margaret Ellis, a stern woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, and David Park, younger, uncomfortable, clearly there as a witness rather than a participant. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming," Margaret began, her tone formal. "We've received a complaint regarding your conduct." Darius felt the floor shift beneath him. What kind of complaint? Margaret slid a document across the table. "A formal allegation that on multiple occasions you've created hostile disruptions in academic settings and exhibited aggressive, intimidating behavior towards students and faculty." Darius read the complaint, his disbelief growing with each word. According to the anonymous report, he'd aggressively confronted Professor Shaw in her classroom, intimidated students with his presence, and created an atmosphere of fear and discomfort across campus. The language was professional, calculated, designed to sound credible. It was also completely fabricated. "This is a lie," Darius said quietly. "All of it." "The complaint includes specific dates, times, and witness accounts," Margaret replied. "We take such allegations very seriously." "Who filed this?" "The complainant requested anonymity for safety reasons." "Safety reasons?" Darius's voice rose slightly. "I've barely spoken to anyone. I keep my head down, do my work, and go home. Ask anyone who actually works with me." David shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Cole, we understand this is upsetting, but protocol requires us to investigate all formal complaints. Until we complete our review, we're placing you on administrative suspension." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're suspending me based on an anonymous complaint with no evidence." "It's temporary pending investigation," Margaret said, her expression unchanged. "You'll need to surrender your campus ID and building access cards. You'll be contacted when we have more information." Darius stood slowly, his hands shaking with barely contained anger. "I solved one equation. That's all I did. And now someone's trying to destroy me for it. This isn't about an equation, Mr. Cole. It's about workplace conduct." "No," Darius said, his voice hardening. "It's about keeping me in my place, making sure I remember I'm just the janitor and I should have stayed invisible." He dropped his ID card on the table and walked out, feeling eyes on him as he crossed campus. Word traveled fast in universities. By lunchtime, everyone would know the genius janitor had been suspended. The whispers would start. Maybe he wasn't what he seemed. Maybe the complaints were legitimate. Maybe he'd been hiding something darker all along. The campus rumor mill exploded exactly as Darius predicted. Students divided into camps. Some defended him passionately, insisting the complaint was obviously retaliation. Others whispered uncertainly, wondering if they'd misjudged him. A few, the ones who'd never liked the disruption his viral moment caused, spoke more openly about how he'd humiliated Professor Shaw and created chaos in the mathematics department. Shaw heard the news during her afternoon lecture. A student raised their hand and asked if it was true that Darius had been suspended for threatening behavior. Shaw's carefully prepared lesson plan evaporated. "Where did you hear that?" she demanded. "It's all over social media. People are saying he got aggressive with you, that you filed a complaint." Shaw's face flushed with anger. "That is absolutely false. I filed no such complaint, and Mr. Cole has never been anything but respectful. Anyone spreading that rumor is lying." After class, Shaw marched directly to the HR office. Margaret Ellis met her with professional coolness. "Professor Shaw, I can't discuss personnel matters with you." "Then let me make something clear to you," Shaw said, her voice low and furious. I was present for every interaction between Mr. Cole and my students. There was no aggression, no intimidation, nothing remotely resembling the behavior described in whatever complaint you received. This is a setup, and I want to see that complaint. Complaints from faculty and staff are confidential. I'm faculty. If someone's using my classroom to fabricate charges, I have a right to know. Margaret's expression flickered, just briefly, with something that might have been guilt or discomfort. I can't help you, Professor Shaw. The process must run its course. Shaw left the office and immediately pulled out her phone. She called campus security and requested access to surveillance footage from the week of the supposed incidents. The security officer, a middle-aged man named Robert Chen, who'd always respected Shaw, agreed to let her review the recordings. She spent 3 hours in the security office, watching footage from every camera in the mathematics building. What she found was exactly what she expected. Nothing. Darius moved through hallways quietly, kept to himself, spoke briefly and respectfully when approached. There wasn't a single frame that could possibly support claims of aggressive behavior. But she found something else interesting. A 14-minute gap in the footage from Tuesday night, the night of the supposed break-in to the mathematics office that had never been officially connected to Darius, but hung over him like unspoken suspicion. The cameras had gone offline, then come back online as if nothing had happened. Shaw took detailed notes and screenshots. Someone had tampered with the security system, and she was beginning to suspect exactly who. While Shaw investigated, Darius sat alone in his small studio apartment, staring at the walls. His phone buzzed constantly with messages, students offering support, reporters requesting interviews, and one particularly persistent email from Dr. Rebecca Morgan at Prometheus. Offer still stands. These problems would disappear if you joined us. Think about it. He deleted the email. Around 6 that evening, there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find 3 students, DeAndre Foster, Emma Patterson, and Sarah Chen, the ones he'd been tutoring. We know you didn't do what they're saying, DeAndre said immediately, and we want to help. There's nothing you can do. This is above your pay grade. We're engineering and computer science students, Sarah said. We know how to dig into data. Let us help. Darius wanted to refuse, wanted to protect them from getting pulled into his mess. But the earnest determination on their faces reminded him that he didn't have to fight alone. Okay, he said. Okay, come in. They worked through the night. Sarah, whose brother Marcus was the doctoral teaching assistant who'd witnessed Darius's equation solution, had access to certain university systems through her research position. Emma had cybersecurity skills from an internship with a tech company. DeAndre was simply brilliant with patterns and analysis. They started by mapping out everyone who might benefit from Darius's removal. The list was surprisingly long. Professors threatened by his intelligence, administrators worried about liability, rival institutions wanting to poach him without competition, even some students who felt their achievements were diminished by comparison. Then Sarah made a breakthrough. She pulled electrical logs from the campus infrastructure, public records that tracked power usage across buildings. On the night of the security camera outage, there had been an unusual power spike originating from the physics research lab. The spike occurred at exactly the right time to explain the camera malfunction. Who has access to that lab? Darius asked. Emma pulled up the faculty directory. Dr. Andrew Lang. He's the head of the advanced physics department. Runs his own research team. Has pretty much unlimited access. Darius recognized the name. Lang had been conspicuously absent from the public discussions about Darius's mathematical solution, but Darius had noticed him watching from doorways, his expression cold and calculating. Why would he care about me? Darius wondered aloud. Professional rivalry, DeAndre suggested. You made Shaw look bad initially, but then you made her look good by association. Shaw's star is rising because of you, and if Lang was already competing with her for department resources or recognition, he'd want to eliminate the source of her new popularity. Emma finished. Classic academic politics. They kept digging, cross-referencing metadata from campus emails, tracking patterns in administrative meetings, looking for connections. Around 3 in the morning, Sarah found it. An email sent from an anonymous account that had been traced back to the same IP address as Lang's office computer. The email contained early drafts of the complaint language that would later be filed with HR. "Got him," Sarah whispered. But having evidence and being able to use it were different things. Lang was a tenured professor with powerful allies. Darius was a suspended janitor with a viral video and 3 undergraduate students backing him up. "We need someone with authority," Darius said. "Someone the administration will actually listen to." "Professor Shaw," Emma said immediately. "She's been trying to help you, right?" Darius nodded slowly. Shaw had proven herself more trustworthy than he'd initially believed, and she had the credentials, the position, and increasingly, the motivation to fight this battle. He texted her at 3:30 in the morning. "Found something. Can you meet tomorrow?" Her response came within seconds. "Yes. My office. 9 a.m. Friday morning, Shaw arrived at her office, early, nervous energy driving her movements. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities and implications. When Darius arrived with DeAndre, Sarah, and Emma trailing behind, she knew immediately that something significant had developed. They spread their evidence across her desk. Electrical logs, email traces, security footage analysis, timeline reconstructions. Shaw listened intently, her expression growing darker as the picture became clear. "Lang," she said finally. "I should have known. He's been passive-aggressive toward me for years, always positioning himself as the department's real talent, while implying I only got recognition because of my gender." "Can we prove he filed the complaint?" Darius asked. "The email IP trace is circumstantial but compelling. Combined with the power spike evidence and his access patterns, it builds a case. But Lang is careful. He'll have plausible deniability for everything. Then we need him to make a mistake," Sarah said. "Something that exposes him clearly." Shaw considered this. The Board of Trustees meets Monday to discuss the complaint against Darius. Lang will be there as a department representative. If we can present our evidence before he has a chance to prepare his defense. "He'll panic," Emma finished. "Make a move that reveals his involvement. It's risky," Shaw warned. "If we accuse him publicly without absolute proof and we're wrong, we lose all credibility. Darius would be finished at this university." Darius met her eyes. "I'm already finished here if we don't fight back. What do I have to lose?" Later that morning, Dean Whitmore summoned Shaw to his office. She went prepared for confrontation, but what she found was something more unsettling. Political calculation disguised as concern. "Evelyn," the dean began, using her first name with calculated familiarity. "I'm worried about you." "Worried about what?" "Your involvement with Mr. Cole. It's becoming noticeable. People are talking about the time you're spending together, the way you've become his defender. It doesn't look good professionally." Shaw felt her anger spike. "I'm helping a brilliant person who's being sabotaged. That's exactly what a professor should do. Or you're allowing personal feelings to cloud your judgment." The dean's voice took on a sharper edge. "You embarrassed yourself in that viral video. Now you're overcompensating, trying to prove you're not prejudiced by becoming inappropriately involved with maintenance staff. It's affecting your credibility." "My credibility is fine. What's affecting this university's credibility is how we're treating someone with extraordinary talent, just because he doesn't fit our typical profile." Dean Whitmore stood, his patience clearly thin. Let me be explicitly clear, Professor Shaw. Drop this crusade. Focus on your research, your teaching, your actual job. Mr. Cole's situation will be resolved through proper channels. Your interference is not helping him, it's making things worse. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. Your contract is up for renewal next spring. The committee considers many factors when evaluating faculty performance, including collegiality and judgment. Shaw felt her hands trembling with rage. You're telling me to abandon Darius or risk my job. I'm telling you to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. What you do with that advice is your choice. Shaw left his office shaking, not with fear, but with fury. She'd navigated academic politics her entire career, played the game, smiled through condescension, proven herself over and over. She'd thought earning tenure meant earning freedom. Now she realized the chains just became less visible. She found Darius in the library, studying placement exam materials despite his suspension. When she told him about the dean's threats, his face hardened. You should distance yourself from me, Darius said. I'm not worth your career. Don't tell me what I should do. I'm making my own choice. Shaw. Evelyn, she corrected softly. If we're going to fight together, use my name. Something shifted in the space between them. For weeks, they'd been professor and janitor, authority and subordinate. Now they were simply two people refusing to accept injustice. Evelyn, Darius repeated, testing the name. Thank you. That evening, an anonymous email arrived in Shaw's inbox. The subject line read, "Stop digging or you'll go down with him." Attached was a blurry photograph taken from a distance. Shaw and Darius sitting together in her office late at night, the image framed to look intimate, possibly inappropriate. Shaw immediately forwarded it to campus police and saved copies. This was escalation, an attempt at intimidation through implied scandal. Whoever sent it, almost certainly Lang, was getting desperate. The weekend passed in tense preparation. Darius, Shaw, and the three students gathered evidence, refined their timeline, prepared their presentation. They practiced different scenarios, anticipated counter-arguments, built their case methodically. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. The Board of Trustees meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the administration building's main conference room. Shaw and Darius arrived together, dressed professionally, carrying a folder of evidence that would either save him or destroy them both. The boardroom was intimidating by design. Mahogany furniture, portraits of past university presidents, high ceilings that made voices echo. 7 trustees sat at a curved table, with Dean Whitmore positioned at the center. Dr. Andrew Lang sat off to the side, looking confident and relaxed. Margaret Ellis from HR presented the complaint against Darius, reading the allegations in a flat, bureaucratic tone. The trustees listened impassively, occasionally taking notes. When she finished, the board chair, a distinguished woman in her 70s named Patricia Hendricks, no relation to Professor Martin, Hendricks asked Darius if he had a response. Darius stood slowly. Yes, ma'am. Everything in that complaint is a fabrication designed to remove me from this university because I embarrassed powerful people and refused to be controlled. Lang snorted softly. Dean Whitmore's expression hardened. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Cole, Patricia said. Can you support it? I can. Darius nodded to Shaw, who stood and began distributing copies of their evidence packet. We've traced the anonymous complaint to its source. We have email metadata, security footage analysis, and electrical logs that tell a very different story than the one you've heard. For the next 20 minutes, Shaw presented their findings with clinical precision. The IP address connections, the security camera tampering, the suspicious timing of every alleged incident, the pattern of professional rivalry between Shaw and Lang that provided clear motive. Lang's confident expression slowly crumbled. His face reddened, his jaw clenched. He started to speak several times, then stopped himself. Finally, Patricia Hendricks turned to the director of campus security, who'd been quietly observing. "Mr. Washington, can you verify this technical evidence?" Leon Washington, a former police detective who ran campus security with quiet competence, stood and examined the documents. He pulled out his laptop, cross-referenced their data against official security logs, and spent several minutes working in silence while everyone waited. Finally, he looked up. "The evidence is accurate. Someone did tamper with our security system on the dates indicated. The power spike originated from Dr. Lang's laboratory facility. The IP trace on the anonymous email is consistent with equipment in his office." He paused, meeting Patricia's eyes. "This wasn't Mr. Cole. Someone went to considerable effort to frame him." The room erupted in murmurs. Dean Whitmore looked like he'd swallowed glass. Lang stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. "This is circumstantial nonsense," Lang said, his voice too loud. "Anyone could have accessed my lab. IP addresses can be spoofed. This is a desperate attempt to shift blame." "Dr. Lang," Patricia interrupted coldly, "I suggest you remain silent until we've finished our review." But Lang couldn't stop himself. The careful facade he'd maintained for years was cracking under pressure. "You're all being manipulated. This man is a janitor who solved one equation and now thinks he belongs in academic spaces. He's making fools of us all, and Shaw is enabling him because she's too proud to admit she was wrong about him from the beginning." "That's enough," Patricia snapped. "Dr. Lang, you are suspended from all university duties effective immediately pending a full investigation into these allegations. Please leave this meeting." Lang's face went white, then red. He looked around the table, searching for allies and finding none. Everyone was either looking at their papers or deliberately avoiding his gaze. The power he'd wielded for years evaporated in seconds. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the portraits rattle. Patricia turned back to Darius and Shaw. "Mr. Cole, on behalf of this board, I apologize for the injustice you've suffered. Your suspension is lifted immediately, and we'll be investigating how our HR protocols failed so dramatically." Darius felt dizzy with relief. Shaw reached out and squeezed his hand briefly under the table. "However," Patricia continued, "this situation has revealed larger questions about your status at this university. You clearly possess abilities far beyond your current position. The board would like to discuss options for your future here, if you're interested." Darius looked at Shaw, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like to take the academic placement exam," he said. "Earn my way back into education properly. No special treatment, no shortcuts. Just a fair chance to prove what I can do." Patricia smiled for the first time. "I think we can arrange that." The meeting adjourned with handshakes and apologies. As Darius and Shaw left the building, they found Sarah, DeAndre, and Emma waiting anxiously outside. "Well?" Emma asked breathlessly. "Lang's suspended," Shaw reported. "Darius is reinstated and—" She looked at Darius with genuine pride. "He's getting his fair shot." The students cheered, hugging Darius despite his protests. Campus security walked past and Leon Washington nodded respectfully to Darius, a small gesture that meant everything. As they walked across campus together, Darius felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the solid hope of possibility. He'd faced the system designed to crush him and had not only survived, but won. Shaw walked beside him, and their hands brushed accidentally. Neither pulled away immediately. "Thank you," Darius said quietly, "for fighting when you didn't have to." "I had to," Shaw replied, "not because of guilt or obligation, but because it was right. And because—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "Because somewhere along the way, This stopped being about making amends for my mistake and started being about who you actually are." Darius met her eyes and something unspoken passed between them. Something neither was quite ready to name yet, but both recognized. The war wasn't over. Lang would fight back, the dean would retaliate in smaller ways, and Prometheus Institute was still circling like a predator. But for this moment, Darius had won something more important than a single battle. He'd won back his right to exist in the space where he belonged. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Darius walked through campus with his head held higher than he had in years. Students greeted him by name. Professors nodded respectfully as he passed. The viral video that had once felt like exposure now felt like validation, proof that he'd been right to take that risk, to pick up the chalk and solve the equation that changed everything. But the real change was still ahead of him. The academic placement exam was scheduled for Saturday morning in the University Testing Center. Shaw had helped him prepare every evening, their sessions growing longer and more comfortable. They'd moved past formalities weeks ago, working through complex problems with the easy rhythm of true intellectual partnership. Sometimes they'd argue about methodologies. Other times they'd build on each other's ideas so seamlessly that neither could remember who'd started which thought. During one late session, Shaw looked up from the practice problems she'd been grading and found Darius staring at the ceiling, his expression distant. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "My mother," he said quietly. "She used to say I had a gift, that I could do anything I set my mind to. When I dropped out to take care of her, she cried, not because she was sick, but because she felt like she was stealing my future." Shaw set down her pen. "You know she wasn't, right? You chose love over ambition. That's not weakness, it's strength. I know that now. But for years I felt like I'd failed her by not finishing what I started, like I'd wasted the potential she believed in." Darius met Shaw's eyes. "Taking this exam feels like honoring her memory properly, finally finishing what we both wanted." Shaw felt her throat tighten with emotion. "She'd be so proud of you, Darius, not just for your intelligence, but for your character, for staying kind despite everything you faced. I learned that from her, too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before returning to their work. But something had deepened between them, a mutual understanding that transcended their circumstances. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn air and bright sunshine. Darius entered the testing center at 8 in the morning, his stomach churning with nerves he hadn't felt in years. The exam would determine his placement level, whether he'd start as an undergraduate, skip ahead to advanced courses, or potentially qualify directly for graduate-level work. The proctor, an older woman named Mrs. Henderson, recognized him immediately. "You're the young man from the video," she said warmly. "Good luck today. I'll be rooting for you." The exam was brutally difficult, exactly as it should be. 4 hours of advanced mathematics covering everything from theoretical foundations to cutting-edge applications. Darius worked methodically, his pencil moving steadily across page after page. Some questions he answered immediately. Others required careful thought, working through multiple approaches before finding the elegant solution. When time was called, Darius set down his pencil, feeling genuinely uncertain. He'd given his best effort, but the exam had been designed to challenge even the most prepared students. Now all he could do was wait. The results came back faster than expected. By Monday afternoon, Darius received an email from the testing office requesting he come in immediately. His heart raced as he made his way across campus, trying to interpret the urgency. Good news or bad? Mrs. Henderson met him at the door, her face split in an enormous grin. "Mr. Cole, I've been administering this exam for 23 years. I've never seen a score like yours." Darius's breath caught. "Is that good or bad?" "It's extraordinary. You didn't just pass. You achieved the highest score in the program's history. The review committee wants to place you directly into graduate-level coursework with full academic standing. Darius felt his knees weaken. He grabbed the doorframe for support, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd just accomplished. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd sacrificed and fought to reclaim. It was real. It was happening. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson continued. "The university is offering you a full scholarship, a stipend for living expenses, and a teaching assistantship position. You'll be helping other students while completing your own degree." Teaching. The word resonated in Darius's chest. Not just learning, but sharing knowledge, helping others the way he'd helped DeAndre, Sarah, and Emma, the way Shaw had helped him. "I don't know what to say," Darius admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Say yes," Mrs. Henderson laughed, "and then go tell Professor Shaw. She's been calling every 4 hours asking if your results were ready." Darius practically ran to Shaw's office. He found her pacing anxiously, her phone in her hand, clearly about to make another call to the testing center. "I passed," he said breathlessly from the doorway. "Highest score in program history, graduate placement, full scholarship, teaching position." Shaw's face transformed with joy. She crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled him into a fierce hug. Darius froze momentarily. They'd been carefully maintaining professional boundaries despite their growing closeness. But then his arms came up and he hugged her back just as tightly. "I'm so proud of you," Shaw whispered. "So incredibly proud." When they pulled apart, both were blinking back tears. Shaw laughed self-consciously, wiping her eyes. "Sorry, I don't usually get emotional about test scores." "This isn't just a test score," Darius said softly. "This is my life starting over, and I couldn't have done it without you. You could have, you would have. I just helped clear some obstacles. You did more than that. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Shaw opened her mouth to respond when a knock on the door interrupted them. Martin Hendricks stood in the hallway, his weathered face creased with a genuine smile. "I heard the news. Congratulations, Darius. I always knew you had it in you." "Thank you, Professor. That means a lot coming from you." Hendricks stepped into the office, his expression growing more serious. "I also came to warn you both. Dr. Lang is making noise. He's filed an appeal of his suspension, claiming the evidence against him was circumstantial and obtained improperly. He has some supporters on the faculty who are uncomfortable with how quickly everything happened." Shaw's joy dimmed. "How much trouble are we talking about?" "Probably not enough to reinstate him, but enough to make things uncomfortable. He's also been making allegations about your relationship with Darius, implying impropriety, suggesting your support of him is motivated by personal rather than professional interest." Darius felt anger surge through him. "That's ridiculous, sir. Shaw has been nothing but professional." "I know that. You know that. But Lang is skilled at planting seeds of doubt. He's going to make your transition into student life as difficult as possible." "Let him try," Shaw said firmly. "We've faced worse." Over the next 2 weeks, Lang's campaign of whispers and insinuations grew. He couldn't attack Darius directly. The evidence against Lang was too solid, and Darius's exam results were irrefutable. But Lang could make things uncomfortable through proxy. A few professors started questioning whether Darius's rapid advancement was truly earned, or if he'd received special treatment. Some students, particularly those who'd never liked the disruption his viral moment caused, muttered about favoritism and lowered standards. Darius tried to ignore it, focusing instead on preparing for his first official semester as a graduate student. The university had worked quickly to process his enrollment, and he was scheduled to begin classes in January, just 2 months away. In the meantime, he'd been offered an opportunity that both excited and terrified him, leading an informal study group for students struggling with advanced mathematics. The first session was held in a large classroom on a Wednesday evening. Darius arrived early, his heart pounding with nervousness. 23 students had signed up, a mix of undergraduates and graduates who'd heard about his teaching style from DeAndre, Sarah, and Emma. When Darius walked to the front of the room, the students burst into spontaneous applause. He stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the reception. "Okay," he said when the applause died down, his voice shaky but gaining strength. "Let's be clear about something. I'm not here because I'm smarter than anyone else. I'm here because I remember what it feels like to not understand something, to feel lost and frustrated and convinced you'll never figure it out. That memory keeps me humble, while it also makes me a good teacher." He picked up chalk and turned to the board. "Tonight, we're going to tackle differential equations. And we're going to do it in a way that makes sense, not just memorizing formulas, but understanding the logic underneath. If you don't understand something I say, stop me. Questions aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of engagement." For the next 2 hours, Darius taught with a clarity and patience that left students stunned. He explained complex concepts using everyday analogies. He worked through problems step by step, showing not just what to do, but why each step made logical sense. When students got stuck, he guided them toward answers rather than simply providing solutions. Shaw observed from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride. This was who Darius was meant to be. Not invisible, not diminished, but standing at the front of a room sharing his brilliance with others. After the session, students surrounded Darius with questions and thanks. One young woman, a junior named Rachel, who'd been on the verge of changing majors due to her struggles with mathematics, had tears in her eyes. "You just explained in 2 hours what my professor couldn't make me understand in 6 weeks, she said. "Thank you. You might have just saved my academic career." Darius felt something shift inside him, a sense of purpose he'd been missing for 15 years. This was what he was meant to do. Not just solve problems, but help others solve them too. As the students filed out, Shaw approached. "You're a natural," she said simply. "It feels right," Darius admitted. "Like I've finally found where I belong." "You have." And Darius... Shaw hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "What Lang is saying about us, about my motives for helping you, I want you to know it's not true. My support for you is genuine, professional." "I know," Darius interrupted gently. "I've never questioned that." "But..." Shaw sensed there was more. Darius took a breath, gathering courage. "But if I'm being honest, somewhere along the way, my feelings became more than professional. I didn't plan it. I tried not to let it happen. But working with you these past weeks, seeing your integrity and your strength, Evelyn, I..." "Stop," Shaw said quickly, holding up a hand. "Don't finish that sentence." "Not yet." Darius felt his stomach drop. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have..." "You misunderstand. I'm not saying no, I'm saying not yet. You're about to start a new chapter of your life. You'll be my colleague, possibly even my student in some shared courses. There are ethics considerations, power dynamics to navigate. If something is going to happen between us, it needs to happen at the right time, in the right way. And when is the right time?" Shaw smiled softly. "When you're standing on equal ground with me. When you're Professor Cole, not just Darius, the former janitor who I helped. When nobody can question whether your achievements are real or products of favoritism." She reached out and squeezed his hand briefly. "I'm not saying never. I'm saying not yet. Can you live with that?" Darius squeezed back. "I've waited 15 years to restart my life. I can wait a little longer for the rest." 3 months later, the university hosted its annual winter academic celebration, a formal event recognizing outstanding achievements and contributions to the community. Darius had been invited as one of the evening's honorees, a fact that still felt surreal. He stood in his small apartment, struggling with the tie Shaw had helped him pick out the previous week. His reflection showed a man transformed. The same face, the same quiet intensity in his dark eyes, but carrying himself differently now. With confidence, with belonging. A knock on the door interrupted his battle with the necktie. He opened it to find Shaw standing there in an elegant navy dress, her hair styled differently than usual, looking simultaneously professional and stunning. "I thought you might need help with that," she said, gesturing to his crooked tie. "Am I that obvious? You've been texting me photos of your tie attempts for the past 20 minutes. Darius laughed, stepping aside to let her in. Shaw fixed his tie with practiced efficiency, her fingers gentle but sure. Standing this close, Darius could smell her perfume, something subtle and citrusy that he'd come to associate with their late-night study sessions. "There," Shaw said, stepping back to admire her work. "Very professional. You look like you belong at an academic celebration. I don't know if I'll ever feel like I truly belong in these spaces." "Good. That awareness will keep you grounded. The moment you start feeling entitled to respect is the moment you stop earning it." They drove to campus together, the conversation flowing easily between comfortable silence and bursts of discussion about everything from Darius's coursework to campus politics. The semester had been intense. Darius was taking a full graduate course load while managing his teaching assistant responsibilities and leading his weekly study groups. He was exhausted most days, but it was the good kind of exhaustion that came from purposeful work. The celebration was held in the university's grand ballroom, a space normally reserved for major donor events and presidential addresses. Hundreds of faculty, students, and administrators mingled beneath glittering chandeliers, the atmosphere formal but celebratory. Darius felt eyes tracking him as he entered. Some looked at him with genuine admiration, others with curiosity tinged with skepticism. A few, Lang's remaining allies, with barely concealed hostility. Lang himself wasn't present. His suspension had evolved into a formal misconduct investigation that would likely result in his termination. Dean Whitmore was there, looking uncomfortable. He'd been quietly reprimanded by the board for his handling of Darius's situation, though he'd kept his position. He avoided making eye contact with Darius across the room. The evening proceeded with dinner and several speeches celebrating various academic achievements. Then Patricia Hendricks, the board chair, took the podium. "We have a special recognition tonight," Patricia began, her voice carrying across the room. "Earlier this year, our university was reminded of an important lesson. That brilliance doesn't always announce itself in conventional ways. That potential can be overlooked, dismissed, or even actively suppressed by systems that should nurture it." The room grew quiet, everyone understanding whom she was discussing. Darius Cole came to this university 15 years ago as a promising young student. Circumstances forced him to leave. When he returned, it was in a capacity that made him invisible to most of us, but his brilliance couldn't stay hidden forever. One equation, one moment of courage changed everything. Patricia gestured for Darius to join her on stage. He stood slowly, his heart hammering, and walked toward the podium. The applause that greeted him was genuine, warm, sustained. "Darius, would you like to say a few words?" Patricia asked. Darius hadn't prepared a speech. He'd assumed he'd simply accept an award and return to his seat. But looking out at the assembled crowd, he realized he had things that needed saying. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm not used to being visible. For most of my adult life, I moved through spaces like this as a shadow, someone people walked past without seeing. I told myself I was okay with that invisibility was a kind of safety." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But invisibility isn't safety. It's erasure. And erasure isn't just something that happens to people like me. people who work jobs society undervalues. It happens to anyone who doesn't fit neatly into expected categories, students who learn differently, researchers who think unconventionally, anyone who challenges the systems we've built around education and achievement. Several people in the audience nodded, including Shaw, whose eyes shone with pride. I'm standing here tonight because one person saw past my job title and recognized my potential. Because students decided I was worth defending even when it put them at risk. Because a board of trustees chose justice over convenience. But for every person like me who gets a second chance, how many don't? How many brilliant minds are we losing because we're not looking in the right places? The room was absolutely silent now. So I'm grateful for this recognition, but I'm also challenging all of us, myself included, to do better. To look for brilliance in unexpected places, to question systems that create barriers instead of bridges, to remember that potential doesn't have an age limit, a dress code, or a job requirement. He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. My mother used to tell me that intelligence without compassion is just calculation. Kindness without action is just sentiment. She taught me that real wisdom means using your gifts to lift others, not just yourself. I'm trying to honor that lesson every day. The applause when he finished was thunderous. Students rose to their feet first, then faculty, then even some administrators. Darius accepted the award, a small, crystal piece symbolizing academic excellence, and returned to his seat, overwhelmed. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached to congratulate him and shake his hand. Students asked about his study group schedule. Professors invited him to research collaborations. One elderly donor pressed a business card into his hand and said quietly, "My foundation funds scholarships for non-traditional students. I'd like to discuss creating one in your mother's name." Darius felt tears prick his eyes. She'd love that. As the crowd thinned, Shaw found him standing alone near the fountain outside the ballroom, staring up at the stars. She approached quietly, standing beside him in comfortable silence. "Quite a night," she finally said. "I keep waiting to wake up." "It's real, Darius. You earned every bit of it." They stood together, shoulders almost touching, neither quite ready to leave, but both aware that the evening was ending. A voice called out from behind them, "Professor Shaw, Mr. Cole." They turned to find a group of students approaching. DeAndre, Sarah, Emma, and several others from Darius's study group. "We just wanted to say congratulations," Emma said. "And also," she glanced at her friends conspiratorially, "we have a question." "What kind of question?" Shaw asked warily. Rachel, the junior who'd nearly changed majors, stepped forward with a mischievous grin. "We were wondering if Professor Shaw ever plans to make good on her original promise." Darius and Shaw both froze, immediately understanding what she meant. DeAndre laughed. "You did say you'd marry whoever solved that equation. We all heard it. It's on video." "That was obviously a joke," Shaw started. "But he actually solved it," Sarah interrupted. "So technically nothing," Shaw said firmly. But she was smiling despite herself. "That was hyperbole made in a moment of arrogance, which I've apologized for repeatedly." "Still counts," Emma sing-songed. The students were clearly teasing, enjoying Shaw's discomfort, but underneath the humor was genuine affection. They'd watched Shaw and Darius's relationship evolve over the semester, seen the connection growing between them, and were rooting for something more than mentorship. Darius surprised everyone by laughing, a genuine, warm sound that transformed his usually serious face. "You know what? She's right. That promise was made by someone who didn't know who I was or what I was capable of. It doesn't count." "Thank you," Shaw said, relieved. "But," Darius continued, turning to face her fully, "if someone were to make a new promise, a real one, based on actual knowledge and respect, that would be different." Shaw's breath caught. "Darius, I'm not asking for promises. he said quickly. I'm just saying that when I first solved that equation, I was trying to prove I deserved to be seen. Now I know I do. And when two people see each other clearly, really see each other, that's when real promises become possible. The students watched this exchange with growing delight, nudging each other and grinning. Shaw stepped closer to Darius, her voice dropping so only he could hear. You're standing on equal ground now. Your achievements are undeniable. Nobody could question your competence or my motives anymore. Is that what you've been waiting for? Among other things. What other things? Shaw smiled. For you to be patient enough to let things develop naturally. For both of us to be certain this is real, not just gratitude or guilt or circumstantial emotion. For the right moment. And is this the right moment? Shaw looked around at the students watching them with barely contained excitement, at the beautiful campus illuminated by lamplight, at the man before her who'd transformed from invisible to undeniable through courage and brilliance. Not quite, she said softly. But we're getting close. Darius smiled, understanding dawning. I can wait. You won't have to wait long. The students groaned in disappointment at the ambiguous conclusion to the conversation, but they were also smiling. They dispersed gradually, leaving Shaw and Darius alone by the fountain. Can I walk you to your car? Darius asked. I'd like that. They walked slowly across campus, neither in any hurry. The paths that had once represented such different worlds for them, she the professor, he the janitor, now felt like shared territory. They talked about Darius's plans for next semester, about Shaw's research project, about the weather and trivial things that felt important simply because they were discussing them together. At Shaw's car, they paused. You know what I realized during your speech tonight? Shaw said. You didn't just solve that equation on the board. You solved this place, this entire university and everything it represents. You showed us who we could be if we actually lived up to our ideals. I had help, Darius reminded her. We helped each other. That's what equals do. Their hands brushed, then clasped. Briefly, gently, full of promise for something that was still becoming. Good night, Evelyn. Good night, Darius. As Shaw drove away, Darius stood in the parking lot for a long moment, looking back at the campus that had once represented his lost dreams and now represented his reclaimed future. He thought about his mother, about the equation that changed everything, about the journey from invisible to undeniable. He thought about Shaw's smile and the way she'd said, not quite, instead of no. And for the first time in 15 years, Darius Cole felt completely, genuinely, peacefully happy. The equation had been solved. The promise, the real one, the one that mattered, was still being written. And that was exactly as it should be. When someone offers you respect only after you've proven yourself extraordinary, was it ever really respect at all? If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more stories about courage, redemption, and second chances.